When you leave on the long and difficult voyage of making a film, especially an indie film, as the captain, you have to focus on finishing the trip, even if you know that not everyone aboard will survive it. Hi, I'm Robert Christopher Smith, captain of the ship for Vengeance Turns Volume 1 and Volume 2, and also for this podcast. So, welcome aboard the Lethal Voice Podcast. This is my confessional, where I dig deep and share every bad decision, every lucky break, and each small victory as I brought Vengeance Turns from the page to the screen. This episode, our longest ever, watch out guys, it totally got away from me, is called The Malibu Ranch and Big Bear. And it's the final episode of Chapter 3, Lockdown Productions. After this, we only have 2 chapters left for our first season, Turning to Vengeance. This episode reflects my recollections and opinions from that period. Others may remember things differently. Where I state facts, they're based on emails, call sheets, and audio and video from the production. I've invited those mentioned here to share their perspective on air. Remember way back at the beginning of Turning to Vengeance in Chapter 1, Putting the Cart Before the Horse, where I told you about meeting Judy from Horses for Productions? Well, one of the most fun phone calls I got to make during the production for Vengeance Turns was reaching out to Judy again and letting her know that we were finally actually making Vengeance Turns, and I needed to reserve 2 horses for 2 days. She was so happy to hear that everything was really happening that she made us a great deal that included having their stunt riders available for us, and she gave us pretty free run of the entire property around her ranch in beautiful Malibu, California. With that and our other footage from Big Bear, we really got some fantastic looking exterior shots and nature shots for this film. Nevin Millan, who had actually been on HBO's True Blood, was one of the last people to be officially cast for Vengeance Turns. But we had met him a few weeks earlier and actually begun working together just a little before it was official. He was introduced to us by Dave Ross before Dave left the production. But we had really only talked like one time at that point. So after Dave was gone, we really weren't sure if Nevin planned to continue with this or not. It turns out he really liked the story, the cast, the crew, that he'd already met all of us, and he had ideas for the character and really wanted to continue in the role of Ghost with Silent Knives Protects, brother to Delicate Poison, played by Kelsey Jaffer. It turned out that both of them had family trees that led back to Pakistan, which made it easier for me to come up with an origin for both characters that their mixed heritage, which is an ongoing theme in Vengeance Turns, is a part. I'm always really happy to incorporate like the real traits and mannerisms into characters in a film from the actors who are playing them. And for our story, it literally worked perfect here because Kelsey and Nevin really got along and had good chemistry like a brother and sister on screen as well. I wasn't crazy about dealing with this manager though, which added a whole new layer into my life and an already time-consuming casting process. But overall, it was well worth it for what we got in the scenes that he shares with Paula the Welmo as Mia and with Kelsey as Delicate. As beautiful as all these final exterior locations were, the shoots were grueling. The days were long, and some of the deepest cracks between me and some of the cast started while we were shooting our very first day in Malibu. Judy had been so amazing with the deal that she had made me, from cost to everything that she was including for that price, just because she had known me and about this project for so long, that she was kind of like everyone else and just pitching in what she could to help us get the film done. Even with all her help, one of the biggest expenses that we had to deal with was with Judy and Horses for Productions, just for the, being able to use those horses and everything. For the use of the horses, the property for 2 days. One of those days ended up being incredibly, abnormally long, by the way. The one thing that Judy had asked of us was to stay away from all the other animal pens so that the other animals could just remain chill, not require any extra attention while she and her staff were going to be busy helping us. And I really thought I had communicated this very clear to the entire cast and crew. Please do not go near these other cages, you guys. There's lots of cute animals all right there within reach to pet and hang out with, but you have to resist the urge to do it. It's the one thing this very nice person has asked as she hosts our production on her property and assists us with her shoot and these other animals. And I'm not kidding you. We weren't there for 30 minutes before Judy comes looking for me. She finds me and just has a very annoyed look on her face. Bobby, I thought I really made it clear that I needed your people to stay away from the other animals. You promised you would tell them. What could I say when she was saying this to me? I told her that I had told them, but that was beside the point right now. And if there was someone not doing as asked, I would go get them and immediately then tell that person and get it back around to the whole cast and crew to stay away from the animals. When I got back up near the cars, close to where the animals were in their pens and all that, I walked over to find the actor who was playing Gloria lying on the ground in front of one of the pens. Maybe it was for a horse or a goat or something. I don't remember, and it doesn't matter. It didn't matter then either. I wanted her out of there. So I walked up and asked, "What are you doing?" And I reminded her that she wasn't even on the call sheet that day as an actor. She was supposed to be there to help us, like on the set as kind of like a basic PA. And this was at her request and from Kelsey, since, like Kelsey, she was staying at our apartment in Gardena at the HQ. And since it was COVID, there was really nowhere else for her to go and nothing else for her to do. So she and Kelsey had asked if they could tag along and help out, since that would give them something to do and make sure they were getting paid for another day instead of just sitting around the apartment and doing nothing. And I thought that was a better idea too. Then she went on to tell me that she didn't think I needed her for a while, so she just wanted to lay down and rest, and she thought it would be nice to do it near the animals. I asked her if she remembered the very final thing I had told everyone before I had walked away and started setting up with David Ruano. And she said, yeah, she did remember, and that I had said not to mess with the animals, and that she wasn't messing with them. She was just laying outside their cages and pens. I told her I should not have to specify that this was enough to be considered messing with the animals to our host, which, by the way, were all gathering up now. The animals, they were coming up near the fences and their gates, expecting to be let out or to be fed. They thought something was happening. And so I told her that our host, that Judy was upset and that I needed her to find somewhere else to stretch out. If that's what she wanted to do, just find somewhere that wasn't off limits, meaning anywhere that wasn't right there. I may not have been the kindest messenger at that point, but I did not have time to candy coat or hold hands on anything, especially with the fact that I had just told them not to do this just minutes before she was doing it. We had everything very tightly scheduled, and I really needed everyone on our team just to follow the basic rules established at this, just like every location, and be prepared if we were going to make it through this, first day out in Malibu and keep this production on track. I reminded her of my whole concept, my mentality of either you're an ally or you are an enemy to the production. And I told her I needed her to be an ally because our day was going to be extremely challenging even under the best of circumstances. And that's why I had wanted her to come along. When I walked back over to the set, expecting to see all the actors rehearsing a pretty complicated sequence that involves a lot of different actions and some important dialogue, as Mia hears a gunshot, she rides away from Simon and sees a couple of cowboys harassing a woman and a little girl beside an overturned horse cart, and there's nobody else around. She starts flashing back to the attack on her family, and due to her brain damage and her rage combined, she's like hallucinating that these are the same men. And then she goes like crazy. She goes wild and starts attacking on both. However, when I walked back over to the actors, I'm already feeling irritated. I asked if everyone was ready to shoot. They started scrambling and heading to the set with lots of sure, yeah. But I also caught a lot of like kind of worried expressions and looks being exchanged between actors on the way over. And sure enough, on the first run through, actors were dropping whole sections of the script, dialogue, missing their marks, and really just making the whole thing a mess. I called cut. I asked them if they needed a minute to look at their scripts, but all of them said no, they were ready to go. And this time they were a little better on hitting most of the dialogue, but the blocking was all off and the delivery in general was just not professional. It wasn't what I needed. I called cut again. I walked over to the set, and I don't know if everyone listening felt like I was being condescending, but I really did. But I also did not see any other way to deal with the situation except breaking this whole thing down for them a piece at a time. The whole thing reminded me very much of like getting my own balls busted in acting class, especially when I very first started. Everyone had sworn to me that they understood how important rehearsal was during the casting process and in the weeks leading up to the shoot, and I really had trusted them on this. But scenes like this were the exact reason that I had been concerned. Rather than spend time individually checking with each actor and explaining to them what I needed them to do, I just started going through the entire sequence, the whole scene myself, performing every action of every actor and delivering every line from memory. My main point along the way was reminding them of those acting class basics, that your dialogue is really only about 10% of what you need to know. It's everything else that's happening when you're not talking that you really need to worry about when you're in front of the camera. Mia jumps off her horse. I pretended to do that and start running toward the bad guys. This distracts the bad guys from menacing the family and inspires one of the cowboys to remark that it looks like a little boy running toward them right before he gets her claw to his neck and shoulder. The bad guy falls. That leads the woman and her kid to do this while the other bad guy does that, and Mia then does this and the bad guy does that. Once the dozens of people gathered could see I wasn't stopping, absolutely everyone stopped talking and stood completely silent as I made my way through about 4 pages of scene, dialogue, the actions that inspired the words in many cases, and I did so without missing one beat. And yes, I did feel like a giant a-hole by the time I was done. But I also would rather be looked at as an a-hole and get this done than to hold everyone's hand there one at a time and just get them to do what they should have already been prepared to do. When I finished, I asked if they wanted to go through it again or if they might actually want to rehearse. They asked if they could have 15 minutes to rehearse their blocking. I happily, if not still somewhat condescendingly, gave them my blessing and walked off to discuss the situation with the animals and what we were going to have to do to cover that again with everyone, or we were going to lose access to this location and the amazing deal that I had worked out. So David and I had to go off and talk about all that. David said he would keep an eye out and make sure everyone knew how important it was to follow the rules here and at every location. Little actor training tip. Neither of us could believe that we were actually being forced to tell supposedly professional actors to please follow the rules established by the location. That's just something anyone in this business should understand. My little breakdown and the actor not following the rules were really, those were our only problems that first day out in Malibu. And like I said earlier, we really did get a ton of great footage once it was over. When you see Mia crawling from her house after the attack and Simon finding her, all of that out in Malibu. All of the warrior circle stuff was there. Anytime you actually saw a tent or the AWA, the little huts, all of that was out there in Malibu as well, along with the scene where Mia attacks these bad guys that I was just talking about. Our second day at the Malibu Horse Ranch was more difficult in just about every way imaginable. First, let me just start by reminding you we were basically around $0 budget in making this, and the ranch had been our biggest single expense just for the animals, the property, the insurance for these 2 days. And it was one of our 3 days that we had scheduled with Nevin as well. That meant there was really a 0% chance of our being able to get back out there again for like a third day. And that meant that no matter how we made it happen, we had to make sure we had like shot all our scenes by the end of that day. Just knowing that had me a little on edge all day, even more than I had been the previous. It ended up being our longest day by far. I was there a little over 17 hours. David Ruano, his dad, and his brother were there for almost 20 hours. And all of our actors were there over 12. As you might imagine, really nobody was in the best of moods throughout that day. But I really did my best. I thought to try and keep spirits high, keep everything on track until we could finally just leave. We didn't have any indigenous or Native American actors apply to be actors or background. So our Lost People background really was a true melting pot, that delicate and ghost like the way they talk about them being in the film. They really invite everyone into this group, which is how Mia and Simon end up thriving there. But having background actors adds in a whole other layer of work for the day as well, along with the expenses of extra water, snacks, food, sunscreen, and everything else that we might need for the day. The property around the ranch where we were shooting was pretty big, and the stunt scenes and anything like that was like near the warrior circle was filmed down this really massive hill with this giant slope, and it was no fun at all going up and down that hill. It was like a 1/4-mile trip. Just so everyone could see how dedicated I was and that I didn't consider any job too small for me. I would hear actors or background actors talking about being thirsty or needing a snack. And if I had a moment while they were like setting up the next shots or whatever, I would just like run up that hill, grab the water, some oranges or whatever I could like get my hands on to help these actors stay comfortable and keep them like all where I needed them as well. As our lunchtime approached, we sent one of our friends who was acting as PA that day out to grab a ton of sandwiches and some sides from a local store. Once the food came back, I was making sure everyone got their food. It's kind of like a Southern thing, and that you just don't eat until everybody else that you're hosting, until they've eaten. So I made sure everyone else got their food, and different people basically had started telling me to make sure that I got to eat something too. But I literally told them I wasn't worried about eating, that my only concern was getting everything done. Of course, no one wanted to hear that, so they kept pushing, and I kept saying I didn't care about lunch. After I saw, though, that everyone else like finally was eating and some people were done, I did grab a sandwich and some chips, though, and just like picked at it on the run while we were setting up our next couple shots. Our first goal for that day was to have like the extra actors, the background, shot out and get, let them leave as soon as possible so that they could, be out of there and we could get on to the other stuff. We still had a couple more shots that we needed of Mia and Simon on the horses. And we also wanted to shoot the scenes where Mia and Delicate meet up with Gloria after the sun goes down and everything. Well, our makeup person, who had already changed the look that I had designed and been counting on for 3 years for the character of Delicate Poison. If you don't know that story, check out the previous episode. I'll, of course, put the link in the description for you as always. Anyway, we left Kelsey and the actress who played Gloria with this makeup person again to get that incorrect, but now consistent and continuous look for Kelsey ready, and to have Gloria's scar and the tattoos applied. When it was time for the scenes and I called for the actors to come over to the set, I noticed that instead of the scar, that the actor playing Gloria now just had something drawn on her face. So I asked what was going on. I called out to the makeup person and I had them come over and pointed, asking like, where's the scar? And she said the actor told her that she didn't want FX makeup applied to her face again. So without asking, I had now had the complete look for Delicate changed and lost the original major scarring for Gloria, settling for this lighter scar, and now it was gone. And even more troubling like inconsistency with how she looked in these previous scenes. This was a case where if we were on a major budget feature, how I had originally envisioned this, I would totally fire everyone involved and reshoot all of those scenes, just like starting over from scratch. But we were not on that kind of budget. And more than anything else, I needed to get the cameras rolling and get these scenes shot before we left. I would never again see the tattoos that I had designed, by the way, and that we had actually gotten on camera for that one day of shooting. Without any input from me, the makeup person and this actor who played Gloria, they just kind of decided on their own that it was just too much trouble to put them back on. As little as I liked what was being shoved down my throat, I had no choice, and we got everyone in position and shot the scenes. Something is always better than nothing when you're making a movie. But my ability to smile through everything was just gone. And I was praying that this would be the last variable for the day. Fortunately for the production, it pretty much was. We did have to deal with some exhaustion all the way around, to the point where Paola was very literally losing her voice by our final takes. But after one full day on this second day out on this Malibu ranch, we did get everything we needed and could finally call wrap, head home, grab a few peaceful hours of sleep before we had to get up the next day and start all over again somewhere else. Kelsey and the actor who played Gloria both rode with me on the way home, since they were staying at my apartment, which was basically the production HQ. We got in the car, started pulling out of the ranch driveway, out onto this little small highway in Malibu. And I had this exhausted but delirious, very sincere smile on my face. Just stunned and pleased that we had succeeded in getting everything that we really needed. All the problems had been left behind, and I was just proud and looking forward to the final days of this shoot and wrapping the whole production. But my smile didn't last long. Kelsey and the actor who played Gloria were talking low to each other, and then Kelsey said to me, "What about that whole thing at lunch today?" And I was like, "Yeah, whatever it takes to get through everything we need, right?" And so she said, "You really can't do that." And I was still smiling, thinking that she was just admonishing me for saying that I would rather stay focused on the production than to eat. But then this other actor, the one who plays Gloria, she speaks up and says something like, "No, it was really messed up what you said to everyone, especially those poor background actors." And my smile was completely gone, just replaced with confusion as I rolled everything that I had said and done the entire day back through my mind, trying to figure out what they were talking about. Before I could even finish asking them what they were talking about, though, she launched into an indictment of me that was like straight from her imagination, as she told me that I had said no one was eating until we got our shot, and that I was refusing to let background even go get water and snacks. To this day, I'm not sure where all this completely where these completely fabricated problems came from. But I was quick to shut both of them down that night and reminded them that the only person at lunch who I had ever said anything about not eating was about myself. There was even the whole thing up there about people telling me that I had to eat and all that. So I really didn't understand them hitting me with this, and I still don't to this day, 5 years later. And on the subject of background and refreshments, I told them that I don't know what they think they saw or heard, but what had actually happened was me running about a mile round trip, up and down this hill a few times to grab water, fresh fruit, whatever was needed for the whole cast and crew, including the background. The fact that they were making such accusations and that they weren't just incorrect, but the utter and complete opposite of the truth, it really had me upset. Unbelievably, they actually just attempted to continue this indictment of me as I drove. So I reached down and I turned the radio on and just gave it enough volume that it got to the point to let them know I was done listening. And the thing is, out where we were in Malibu, my radio was not picking up the station that I had it set to. So it was only static coming through. But I didn't bother changing the channel, and neither did they. So static was the only sound that we heard for about the next few minutes or so, until we were pulling back into an area where I could get reception, and then it was music until we got back to the apartment. Once we were ready to shoot our last few scenes, we decided that we would really like to be shooting out in Big Bear. That's what we chose, was Big Bear for these final scenes. And we were having a pretty intense meeting at our apartment at the HQ to discuss all this and be sure exactly how to pull it off, because we still had one interior sequence that we needed to shoot that was pretty important. I don't know if you remember at the beginning of this chapter when I talked about the possibility of shooting the sequence that I call the incident at the Sutherland place, that I considered maybe shooting that as a short film or a proof of concept if we had needed it. And now that was one of the last parts that we were shooting for the film, actually, was that scene. And was the only thing left that we had to shoot interiors for. But we still had a ton of exterior shots for scenes and different sequences all through the movie. David and I made a list and were debating, which one made the most sense and for the best cost, like the different locations and apartments and things that we might be able to use. And all of a sudden, Kelsey comes walking in and points to one and told us that it was booked. She said it was booked and then told us the amount that we owed her for booking it. At no point during any discussion had David or I told anyone that they had permission to spend large sums of money without our okay. So I was shocked once this happened. But being close to the end and surviving everything else that I had already survived just to get this far, I knew that something as small as someone else taking some initiative without being asked was not going to be an issue that should stop the production. We were in the right price range, and the place had like really everything we needed inside and out. So clearly we gave her the money and we moved on. The call sheets went out and we let everyone know what the earliest time they could show up to that location was, asked who needed to spend the night, started putting together the whole plan, the itinerary for getting all the final shots for the movie, as well as like our logistics for the accommodations, transportation, and food. We ended up with about 7 or 8 people spending the night, and another 2 or 3 who either came to the shoot, left and came back, or just came for their scenes and left. Luckily, the place we had secured was more than big enough for all of us who stayed. It was actually a pretty nice place. As you know, if you've been listening to the Lethal Voice podcast up until now, we were filming all of this in October of 2020. So like during the absolute height of the COVID pandemic and the lockdown. Most productions weren't even coming back to Hollywood yet. And those that were trying to figure like some kind of COVID protocols out as quickly as possible. But even that seemed to shift and evolve all the way up until the lockdown ended. As an indie production with no budget, I'm actually pretty proud of the protocols that we developed and implemented on our own. Each member of our cast and crew was asked to go get a COVID test, and we provided links to where everyone could find a place to go get one for free. Then they needed to send us the results of their COVID test. We also asked that they basically kind of quarantine themselves after we hired them and they got their test, and just limit their going out and having people over, all of that. And as nervous as we all were, especially me, who had already been through COVID once and did not want to test my ability to survive it again, we were all, just as nervous as we all were. There was a general like sense of ease around our set due to these protocols that we had asked everyone to follow. Our plan for these final 2 days in Big Bear were to shoot the interior scenes that we needed for the Sutherland Place thing on that very first night that we were there, just to like get that out of the way. Then spend the very first like whole day after we woke up shooting all day outside to get everything we needed there before the sun went down. We lost our light. At that point, we'd have dinner, come back and shoot a couple of night scenes before we got a few hours rest. And the next day we would move over to the residence of one of our background actors, actually, that we had met when shooting the little town scene out in Little Rock that I was telling you about in the previous episode. We had really gotten along very well with several of our background actors, and one of them had even written a song the night after the shoot with us, and I'll include that in the link for that below. That same guy invited us out to use their property on the other side of Big Bear to shoot these last few exterior scenes that we needed, and said that they even had a couple of guys to play cowboys if we needed them. It was an amazing way to end the shoot, and in one of the most beautiful places possible, one of the most lovely places that I've ever seen. But the previous day, our last full day, saw more tension, drama, and hard feelings than maybe the rest of the shoot combined. The previous night had been great, and we got exactly what we needed for that Sutherland Place stuff for those scenes. It took a little improvising to hide the rest of the cabin as Mia and her gang burst in, and some creative camera and editing work to avoid the TV above the door. But we navigated all that with ease. And overall, we really had fun in the process while we were shooting this stuff. And the next morning and afternoon with Paula and Azim as Mia and Simon was amazing, shooting all this stuff outside. We really got some nice emotional delivery from both of them. And the beautiful, lush green surroundings looked amazing on camera for every shot. After we got all their stuff, we ate lunch. And by that point, Kelsey and the actor who played Gloria had eaten, gone through makeup so we could shoot, with them before we lost the sun. David, Jess B, and I got everything set up. The other actors were in place and practiced with their dialogue. But both Kelsey and the other actor were missing words and really whole lines like crazy during the shoot. I stood near the set and started trying like to whisper the lines to them, but both of them were flatly ignoring me. I'm watching the sun go down, and that just puts me in a huge panic. And I just walk over to Jess B. I tell her that for whatever reason that these actors seem to be dragging their heels, and it feels like it was specifically to spite me. And so I wasn't going to be able to deal with them rationally. I needed her to go over and get them to get on track, say their dialogue, and to listen to her if they were stuck, as she like stood, on standby with the binder, listening to every word they said. Meanwhile, I kept my distance from the set for the sake of all of us and for the production itself. By the time we wrapped these scenes, we literally had different light for every single shot. And with our limited camera crew, our options were very limited as far as like using things to redirect light or to flag or block light earlier and to keep things consistent. But we did it. We got it done. You could literally feel the tension between me and the other actors. But all that was beside the point, because we had everything we planned for the whole day, all of our shots in the can. Soon we would be moving on to a couple of night shots, and we would be done with this location. We could crash and be ready to get out early the next morning over to the last location and be done. That night, though, I walked outside and took a brief walk around just to enjoy the peace and the beautiful, cool night air in Big Bear, ready to come back and hit the sack. But instead, as soon as I walked in the door, I hear shouting as the actor who played Gloria was screaming at the entire gathered group that I was trying to kill them. As you might imagine, I found this not just shocking, but ridiculous. So I asked her and everyone to calm down and explain what was going on. She screamed at me that I was a liar and that I was putting them all in danger. I had no idea what she was talking about, but because she really seemed to believe whatever she was screaming about, and I was infinitely curious at that point, I asked her again, "What are you talking about?" "COVID," she screamed. "COVID." She screamed that I had promised that everyone was tested and the whole thing about the protocols. And I said, yeah, that's true. That's exactly what we did. So what's the problem? And that's when our makeup person tells me that she had just heard from her husband that he might be, not was, but might be positive for COVID. And the actor who played Gloria was screaming at me because I had not made the makeup girl's husband get a test. And since the makeup person was living with him, then surely now we were all infected and going to die. I tried to bring peace to the situation by reminding her and everyone else that I had actually had COVID and was actively doing everything possible to keep us all safe, just because I selfishly wanted to keep myself safe, really hoping that this might diffuse the situation at least a little. But instead, she continued to rant at me, repeating basically the same things over and over and over again, and then turning to the gathered group and screaming at them about why weren't they more upset. And she basically seemed like she was going to scream until she did succeed in making everyone upset. Me? I chose to walk away. But first, I very clearly told her that she had exactly 5 minutes to get this out of her system, that I had heard her out. I understood why she was so upset, but everything she was telling me was out of my control. There was no proof that any of us, even the makeup person, even her husband, was actually in any danger, and that primary to everything At this point, there was nothing we could do about it. And all the screaming was going to solve nothing at all. But it would affect the mood, the energy, the vibrations of this whole group. 5 minutes. You have 5 minutes. Then I walked into another room and I set a timer on my phone for 5 minutes while I continued to listen to her scream about me out there to the cast and crew. A few people like Paula and David followed me or stopped by my room just to make sure like that I was okay. And like now they would wanted to see the timer work its way closer to 0. And it did, of course. But she was still in there ranting. So I walked back out and I let her know that the 5 minutes I had allotted for her to scream and drag my name through the mud was over, and that I officially had had enough, and asked her to stop. She couldn't stop, and instead continued to hurl profanities and insults at me. So I told her she was fired and that she needed to leave immediately. Suddenly, you could hear a pin drop in that room as her screaming finally stopped. She broke that silence with an arrogance that only an actor who has worked until the last day of production can show, telling me that I could not fire her because we still had important scenes to film with her tomorrow. I told her that she was fired and that nothing else mattered except her leaving immediately. From behind me, suddenly, Kelsey also spoke up, saying that I couldn't fire her. So I spun around and asked Kelsey if she wanted to go too. And I didn't hear another word after that. David Ruano pulled me outside to talk to me, and I told him that before he started, I needed to tell him that I was not like even the slightest bit flexible in what I was saying. And as I did, I looked down at my hands, and I'm not kidding you, the skin on the back of my hands was bubbling like it was boiling into blisters, like right in front of our eyes. And I'm glad that I had a witness to this. David said, though, that he agreed with me and that for the same reasons that I felt, and he wanted the actor that played Gloria gone at this point too. He was only pulling me outside so that we could work out the logistics, keep the last day of the shoot on track, and to make sure I was okay. And I was standing there with my skin bubbling. He said that he and his brother would load this actor in the van for me and drive her to LAX immediately, get her a hotel room next door so she could fly out the next day as planned, like already. Meanwhile, I could stay behind, rework the script, make the final rewrites that would be necessary to use what we had already, and then figure out a way to account for the loss of this actress in these final scenes. This was the most pressure I had ever felt at any time during the shoot for Vengeance Turns. And I stayed up almost the entire night reviewing footage, looking through the script, and getting something ready for us to shoot the next day. My solution, it ended up involving the use of David's brother, Andrew, who had been along for the whole production as our boom operator. We put him in the top that Gloria wore and then shot right over his shoulder. And Kelsey, in character as Delicate Poison, tells her to wait right here. And thus, we write her out of the next few pages. And then when the action picks back up, we already had the footage that we needed. Success. That final day, as we moved over to the background actor's property and shot those final scenes, there was a clear balance between joy and relief at our success and a hangover from the heavy feelings of the past 24 hours. But when I called cut the final time and then said, okay, guys, that's a wrap, the whole journey just like flashed through me, and a huge weight that I had not even known was there was suddenly released. I felt freer and more fulfilled at that moment than I had since originally coming up with the idea over 3 years earlier. There was a huge spread of food for us when we were done, but as everyone else eagerly lined up, relieved it was all over, I had to walk away for a moment and catch my breath and to cry a little. I didn't want any of them to know that that's what I was doing, but they knew. So after 3 years of writing, developing, putting the cart before the horse, and dealing with false starts, after 20 days of production and too many highs and too many lows to count, I had actually done it. Vengeance Turns was in the can. Now, I only had to figure out what to do with all this footage that we got from those 20 days and our 135-page script. But I already told you this was going to be the longest episode ever, so you guessed it. I know I have rambled far too long already, and deeply thank you if you hung in with me and made it through all of that in one listening, and just for listening at all. But before I do go, though, I want to remind everyone that the very next film I worked on was called Spread Pigs to Slaughter. It's a very cool, very scary slasher thriller, and it premieres on Thursday, October 30th, 7 p.m. at the Regal Cinemas in North Hollywood. And if you are in Los Angeles or in the Southern California area, I hope you'll join us there for the red carpet, the film, and for the Q&A after. I'll put a link below, along with all the Vengeance Turns, Volume 1, Volume 2, links and all that stuff in case you haven't seen them yet. But that's all for tonight, Lethal Ones. So until next time, go where your passions take you. Take that first step. And then finish what you started. I'm Robert Christopher Smith, and you have my deep appreciation for hanging out for another episode of the Lethal Voice podcast. See you soon for the home stretch, Lethal Ones.